Hello, and welcome to UnKpopular Opinions, a safe space for fans of BTS and other K-pop groups to ask the tough question, what do I think of this? I'm your host, Ginger Nuna, and today we're talking about how growth, nostalgia, and rage may be contributing to Tomorrow by Together's success. So, Tomorrow by Together had a comeback this week. It was on August 17th, 2021. They released a repackaged album. This one is called The Chaos Chapter Fight or Escape, and it's a repackage of the Chaos Chapter Freeze. And I would say that it's pretty likely after the Dream Chapter trilogy that this is going to be another trilogy for them that's based on fight, flight, or freeze, the reaction that people have when they feel like they're in danger. At first, I wasn't sure if we were going to go through with the whole trilogy thing, just because they ended up using Fight for a repackage album. But looking back at BTS's discography, the Greatest Moment in Life series, the HYYH trilogy, their third album is actually a repackage. So it's entirely possible that they're still going to go for a trilogy while using a repackage and two regular albums. But I'm not sure. We'll just have to wait and see. But I want to go on record and say that I think the next album is going to be the Chaos Chapter Flight. So with the release of Chaos Chapter Freeze, TXT has found this new growth in their popularity. For example, they have been on the Billboard Top 200 for 9 weeks. They peaked at number 5. And something that I thought was really cool was they performed both Magic and 0 by 1 Love Song on Good Morning America. Good Morning America is an American, obviously, daytime news program. And I think this is a really big indicator of just how popular TXT is becoming, because normally we relegate relatively unknown groups to late night TV. That's something you're more likely to see on Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, James Corden. But the fact that they had TXT on twice for Good Morning America, and one of their songs was in Korean, as far as I know, the only other group to have done that is BTS. I might be wrong. If I am, please let me know. But that's huge. And that just speaks volumes about how popular TXT is becoming. And I personally think that there are 3 things that are causing this increase in their popularity: growth, nostalgia, and rage. If you're listening to the Spotify edition of this episode, you just heard the song I Need You by BTS, and you're probably wondering why. This is not a BTS podcast. This is a TXT podcast. And I'm doing it to illustrate a point. I think it's important for us in all ways, both artistically and everything else, to look back and learn from our history. So looking back at the history of Big Hit, BTS was doing pretty well during their School Trilogy and Dark and Wild days. They weren't doing great, but they were doing okay. But their first real bump in popularity was with the release of the song I Need You. That also gave them their first music win. It was a really big deal for them. I think they even say that I Need You is one of, if not the most important songs in their history. And I think I Need You and the Most Beautiful Moment in Life trilogy were so popular because they ushered in this new sound for BTS. BTS, as we all know, initially started as a hip hop group. And while their music had some variation to it, it was still very much hip hop, R&B based. And with the Most Beautiful Moment in Life, or HYYH series, they started exploring this softer sound and softer image. And it was a really big surprise for people. And that definitely opened the door for their more eclectic sound that we know now. I feel like when we hear BTS now, no matter what genre they choose, we go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. It's a BTS song. They're not like some groups where you hear a song and you know immediately that song belongs to a certain group. You hear a song for BTS and then look back and listen to it and say, oh, I guess, yeah, that is a BTS song because they have such an eclectic sound. And that's something that TXT actually started with. They had an eclectic sound from the beginning. That's something I commented on in episode 2 when I'm talking about their debut with The Dream Chapter Star and how I think there were 5 songs, but all 5 songs had very different feelings. There was one that was really trap based. There was a ballad. There was this kind of beachy boy band number. There was the sugary pop song. So they really just hit all of these marks on their debut album. And in some ways, I think that this more mature sound is something that we could have inevitably found with TXT. When they debuted a little over 2 years ago, they were branded as a bright and youthful boy band. But there's only so long that you can keep with that concept. Now they are all legally adults, I think pretty much everywhere in the world. And so there's only so long that you can do the boyish concept. So now they're starting to move into this older concept and exploring how their world is changing as young adults. So even though TXT started with a really eclectic sound, it shouldn't be a surprise that they are going for a more mature sound. But still, what happened with the release of 0 by 1 Love Song, there was this abrupt concept change and sonic change. And I think this was one of those catalysts that increased their popularity. So the second catalyst, I think, that is fueling this newfound popularity or increase in popularity, because let's be honest, TXT has always been popular to a certain degree. But their newfound popularity, especially overseas with an American market, I think a big part of that is nostalgia. So the sound that TXT is using these days, specifically on songs like 0 by 1 Love Song and Loser Lover and Frost, that might sound fairly new and innovative to Gen Z. But to millennials who are listening, this is just a callback to our youth. This is a very familiar sound to us. The sound of pop punk, the sound of emo. These were mainstream, played on the radio sounds that we heard when we were about the same age that the TXT members are now. And I think one of the main drivers of this sound is actually Olivia Rodrigo and her popularity. When she first came out with Driver's License was huge. And part of what made Driver's License so big was that it was incredibly relatable. The lyrics are relatable to people Olivia's age who are experiencing these moments. But even me, as an adult who's married, I cried the first time I heard Driver's License because it felt like she was telling my song. And I thought, well, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm being kind of nostalgic and silly. But then there was a skit on SNL, Saturday Night Live. I think it was actually on Olivia's 18th birthday. And it's a bunch of Midwestern, middle-aged men hanging out. I think they're shooting pool in a bar. And Driver's License comes on, and they all lose it. They all know this song. They all relate to this song. And it really was just this litmus test for how much this song was touching everybody, at least in the United States. So after she dropped Driver's License, her next single was Deja Vu, and that still did really well. It was popular. That's the one I hear the most often on radio nowadays, oddly enough. But the third song she released had the most staying power. Good For You has been in the top 3 on the Billboard Top 100 for over 3 months. And I think one of the reasons that this song has stayed solidly in that top 3 is that this song isn't just being enjoyed by Gen Z. This song is being enjoyed by adults. They're tapping into that nostalgia. The way that Olivia sings and her songwriting style, it's really reminiscent of Alanis Morissette and No Doubt and a little bit later Paramore. And I just was thinking the other day, if Olivia Rodrigo were a Pokemon, she is like the base form. And then if she evolved to get a little stranger, for someone in my generation, she reminds me a lot of Regina Spektor. And then if she evolved again from Regina Spektor, she would be Bjork. And it's just this really talented, interesting vocals, interesting story, interesting narrative that she shares with people. And that's a big thing about nostalgia. Nostalgia is just reminding you of feelings. And usually it's feelings and events from your youth because you're looking back in time. And the times that adults are most likely to have rose-colored glasses when we think about them are our childhood and young adult times. And I think that's something that TXT is doing. So, like, the official remix of 0 by 1 Love Song is the emo core remix. They're really leaning into this emo sound. So, for me, who grew up, I was really in my angsty time. I was really into Good Charlotte, New Found Glory, Avril Lavigne. I listened to a lot of pop punk and rock. This just made me feel nostalgic, hearing the vocal qualities, hearing the lyrics and the stories that are being told by TXT on this most recent album. The first time I heard 0 by 1 Love Song, I actually felt like Taeyeon was channeling the ghost of Chester Bennington. Chester Bennington was the lead singer for the band Linkin Park, and sadly, he took his own life a few years ago. But Taeyeon especially, and Hyun Kai to a certain amount, have the same rough sound that Chester had, but without sounding like he's hurting himself, which is important. So listening to this new TXT album and thinking about this podcast actually made me so nostalgic. I compiled a playlist just for you, my listeners. I call it my Rage List, and I've included a link below in the description, and it's available on Spotify. So while I was compiling this Rage List for you guys, it made me think about the feelings I had been having those years ago and the events that caused those feelings. And for my younger listeners, if you're listening to this podcast, I think you are old enough to hear this. You're going to be told a lot that it gets better. And I'm going to tell you that it gets different. And usually different means better. But I don't want you to think that one day you're going to be a grown up and everything will magically be different and better. It'll just be different. And I think what a lot of adults have trouble with our hindsight is that all of the wounds that made us have scarred over so much to make this scar tissue that it's easy to forget how much we felt when we were your age. So I just want you to know that angsty teenagers are not a new thing, but it is something that, like childbirth, you forget the pain of with time, or else you wouldn't want to keep going, honestly. When I was making this rage list, I also thought about, I am really glad that I have such a good therapist. So when you listen to the rage list and you think about young adult Ginger, try not to be too concerned about me. I'm good. It's all good. I'm happy with my life now. But those songs that I put on my rage list are ones that I wanted to share with you. For younger listeners, I hope they're ones that speak to you and that maybe encourage you to explore these artists. They might be artists you've never heard of. They might be artists that you now hear on oldies radio. Oh, God, that's awful. It might be one of those things where your parents have a CD of them lying around, but you don't have a CD player anymore because that's just where we're getting. But I'm hoping that it's something for you and it brings some kind of joy. And I hope you feel seen when you listen to these songs. For my older listeners who are my age and older, who are, in their 30s, I hope that this rage list brings you nostalgia and it brings you joy in thinking about the pain that you survived and how it did feel like the end of the world. It felt like you couldn't go on. But here you are. You did go on. And some of these songs on the rage list, those are what helped you through it. And I would love to know what songs would be on your rage list. So listeners, feel free to send those my way. I am always up for learning about new bands, old bands, any genre. Send them my way. I'd like to hear it. So basically, in summation for this part, I think the big thing that we need to take away is that this nostalgia factor was something that TXT was able to tap into. And by tapping into nostalgia, you are inevitably going to widen your audience. The third catalyst for this is maybe the most important catalyst. It's the catalyst that is the strongest. And actually, I think all change can be attributed to this catalyst. And that catalyst is rage. Throughout the pandemic, now that we're over a year into it, I think we can look back at the beginning of the pandemic. So I would call 2020 the beginning of the pandemic with just how long it's continuing. And in 2020, I feel like a lot of the feelings universally were feelings of fear and feelings of sadness and feelings of hoping to feel connected to someone because we couldn't connect with anyone. With 2021, our feelings changed because we're getting tired. We're getting tired of what's going on with the pandemic. I think a great way to look at it musically is back in 2020, BTS gave us Dynamite because they wanted to give us this bright, happy, almost mindless, in the best way, song to make us feel good and for a minute just move on and think about something else. And then in 2021, they gave us Permission to Dance. But we didn't need permission to dance. We needed permission to be pissed off because we're so tired. You could be pissed off because you followed all the rules, you got vaccinated, and you live in a country where the vaccine is free and easily available to anyone 12 or older, and people still won't do it. You might be pissed off because you live in a country where you don't have access to the vaccine and friends and family members are dying. And you look at the country that has access to the vaccine and is saying no to it. That would make me really pissed. You could also be pissed because this random K-pop podcaster is railing into you about getting the vaccine. And you know what? That's okay, because get the vaccine. Get the vaccine. That's my soapbox moment for this episode. Is just get the freaking vaccine. But as you can see, rage is an undercurrent, I think, for everyone, regardless of your situation or how you feel about the pandemic. No one wants the pandemic to still be happening. Everyone wants it to be over. Everyone is tired of what is going on. And TXT, by coming out with these emo, almost punk songs, like Olivia Rodrigo with Good For You, was all of a sudden giving us all permission to feel this feeling of rage. And honestly, even if we weren't in a pandemic, I think finally having some music that is based in anger and frustration would still bring in new listeners to TXT. Because I think that is something, as women, we often have this undercurrent and we have these feelings of rage, but we're told we can't express them. We're told to push them down. We're told your job is to become a parent, or your job is to focus on your career. But whichever one of those you choose, then there's going to be somebody else telling you that you chose the wrong one. And they also tell you, because you're an adult, you should have your shit together. You should have your emotions in check. And that's not always true. That is just not the case. So having this popular music that's easily accessible, even though it's being sung by 5 men who, had I made very different life choices, I could have been their mother. It still speaks to me, and it still gave me permission to feel these feelings. And I think that that's pretty common for a lot of women, is being able to have an outlet for feeling angry. It's something that I'm always telling my kid, trying to instill in them that your emotions are never wrong. And it's just like the movie Inside Out. You need to feel your emotions. You need to feel all of your emotions. It's what you choose to do after acknowledging those feelings. That's what's important. Is TXT the only K-pop group that's really giving me these rage vibes? Absolutely not. I would say that their contemporaries, Stray Kids, they also I listen to them a lot at work. I listen to Stray Kids a lot at work just because even when I don't know their lyrics, it just feels powerful and it feels like I can go and kick some ass today. And then my new favorite rookie group, Just Be, also has this rock and roll feeling. And in a way, it kind of reminds me of BTS back when they did NO. And even though that song was still really hip-hoppy, the message is what's coming through in this 4th gen boy group K-pop music, where they're using an emo sound or a rock sound, but it's the same message of question everything, don't let the world squash you. So I would say that this is just the kind of music that everyone needs at this point in time. And we got lucky that TXT gave it to us when they did. But as the pandemic continues to drag on, who knows what the next phase of music is going to be like. And I'm curious, what do you guys think will be the next kind of music? Do you also feel the same way that I do, where you're feeling angry or you're feeling tired, or are you in a different place in the pandemic? And if so, can you please tell me how you got there? Because I would really appreciate that. You can send all of these thoughts and ideas to unkpopularopinionspod@gmail.com. And as I've mentioned before, if you're listening to the special Spotify edition of this episode, it's the one that says Spotify EP 13. You get to listen to the songs that I talked about in this episode. But even if you don't have that episode, go check out that Spotify Rage list. Let me know what things we should be adding to it. And listeners, of course, don't forget to keep questioning. I'll talk to you next time.